and hate to miss anybody on the front end. So
Yeah, I'll just give some few, again, do some housekeeping, which we always do at the beginning of these meetings.
I'll tell you what, Cheryl, if you want, I will share my screen.
Yeah. Oh, do you have
share? I'll share the PowerPoint, so I've got the agenda. I'll just throw it up there because I'm not a Zoomer, and I better have some lead time.
You got to be a Zoomer nowadays. Go ahead.
Well, I'm a Teams player.
Oh,
we
Teams.
use Microsoft Teams.
Okay.
So, okay. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I can see it. If it's a PowerPoint and you want to do it as a slideshow, you need to hit the slideshow to start it. Yeah, and you don't want to display your things. You want to display you want to display display settings.
Display settings.
Swap. There you go. Duplicate slideshow maybe. Is that okay? Does that work? Yeah, because then you get the full screen, not just the pieces of it. Oh, I got 3 people in the waiting room. Hold on.
So the important thing is, are people seeing my screen?
If I can
Chris,
see
it.
Yeah, we're seeing it there, Ken. Yeah, looks good.
Okay.
Oh, somebody put a thumbs up in the chat too. So. Okay. Well, I'm recording this meeting. I'm Cheryl St. Peter. This is Kirk St. Peter with me from Friends of Cross Lake. And we're just hosting this meeting for Irving Woodlands regarding the Spruce Budworm problem in Cross Lake Township and their plans to spray for that. And again, I'll let people in if more people join. I'll also keep an eye. I told Ken I'd keep an eye on the chat. And in the meantime, if you're not speaking, it would be really good if you muted your microphone, because sometimes there's background noise and echo, and the mute button should be down in the lower left. You can just click on it. If you want us to see you, a lot of you have your video off, which is fine, but you can certainly turn it on. That's not a problem. Yeah, I already said I'm recording it. So I will put a link up later on YouTube that you can watch it. And if you have questions or comments as the Irving guys are going along, you can put it in chat and I'll watch for them, and questions and answers will be at the end. Or you can also write it down and ask verbally at the end if you want. So just so you don't forget your question. And I think that's it. Ked's sharing his screen, and today I think speaking is going to be Ked Coffin, the regional forester from Irving Woodlands, Chris Houston, who's also a forester from Irving Woodlands, and Dr. Neil Thompson from UMF University of Maine at Fort Kent. Ked, I guess I'll turn it over to you unless you have something else.
No, very, very good, Cheryl. Thank you very much. I guess, first of all, I just really appreciate FOCL's help, particularly through you, Cheryl. Natasha's help with distributing flyers and whatnot, informationals to folks. I can't say enough about the good work that the folks at FOCL have done. And, I don't know how many people we get on here, but FOCL's been around for a couple of years now. And I'd encourage you to be involved with what's going on there. Good stuff, and great opportunity to host more than just water quality, I think. So anyways, I'm Ked Coffin. I can't see you all. I'm sure there's a bunch of people that I know, friends. I'd say hi. And this is about, why are we here? We're here because we have spruce budworm in our backyard, something that's always been there. It's always at background levels, but things are changing a little bit. We wanted to inform you And we have some work that we need to do just to keep things in check. No big plans, but just we're watching things and some new stuff going on anyways that hasn't been around for the last 40 years or so. We want to get our neighbors informed, and we want to allow people a chance to ask questions and hear from us, because a lot of times when people see a helicopter and whatnot out there working in the forest, they make their own assumptions, and we'd rather say it ourselves. So are you guys getting an echo? Can't hear you.
I just muted a couple of people because there was an echo. I have the capability of muting people as the host, and
Oh, wow.
I'll attest to that.
Mute him. Mute him.
That's where that came from. If somebody has their speaker on, sometimes there's an echo. So I just muted them, Ked. You should be all set.
Very good. Folks, feel free to put in some chats as we go if you got questions, so that we've got something going on there. There might be stuff that myself or Chris or when somebody else is talking, we might be able to quickly answer it for you. And if not, then we'll try to save it for the end or get back to you later. But we're here because we want to inform you. A lot of times our operations, we're out in the big woods and you don't see a lot of what's going on. We're not in close proximity to folks. And to be quite honest with you, as foresters, I know myself, I really don't care to do this kind of stuff. But I think it's necessary so that folks are informed. I know many of you because I live here myself. This is my home as well. And I particularly feel obligated to speak up about things to help you make informed decisions. Why have we asked FOCL's assistance? The Friends of Cross Lake, like I said, is just a tremendous networking capabilities that are beyond, it's folks like myself and Chris that are out here doing the work for Irving. And we don't have as much of an expertise or a touch at how to reach out to folks. And FOCL's been building that, and we're talking about it, Chris and I are talking about it, about how do we reach people. And I said, that's the whole intent of the Friends of Cross Lake is to work on things that our people are concerned about in the environment in the Cross Lake area. So hence FOCL. So Cheryl's already, I guess, gone over the ground rules. I've got all kinds of time, but it's a Saturday. It's beautiful. So we'll try to, the biggest thing I could see Cheryl doing is helping to keep us on track. So we're just I'm going to try to quickly go through things, but at the same time, allow people to have time and feel comfortable enough to be able to ask questions. So we've got all the time we want, but we want to be respectful of your weekend and downtime. So we're going to talk real quick about Spruce Budworm, why we're concerned about it, the scientific strategy. We'll get into the details. We'll ask Dr. Neil Thompson to kind of highlight some of the things about population dynamics, what we call an early intervention strategy, the product that we're using. What are the concerns? What is the product? The treatment area and application. The big reason that we're here. The big reason that we're reaching out to you is because we have a significant area right in, and when I say in our backyards, it's not my backyard. I have it here in my backyard in Stockholm, but not at the same level as we do off the west side road at Cross Lake. So we are in close proximity. There's an interface there between our operations, and we want to have a discussion about that. So a discussion about buffering around the camps. Communication. So, what kind of signage you're going to see, links to Spruce Budworm information. Dr. Thompson, Neil's a professor at the University of Maine, Fort Kent. He's excellent with doing field tours and informing people. Neil's up for spending some time with folks that are interested. We are as well. Time for questions and answers. And then, at the end here, just how do we want to inform people of the important treatment dates? So I'll start with this. You know, spruce budworm, why are we concerned about it? I'll just highlight here, you know, it's for those that aren't familiar with spruce budworm, it's a native insect. Its outbreaks cover vast regions and spread through massive dispersal events. So basically huge clouds of moths in the upper atmosphere get transported from one area that's being affected to another area that's not being affected. So these moths, you know, they get swept up in the winds and they get deposited around. So we'll talk about that in a second in more detail, how that's what's happened here. What does it eat? So the spruce budworm eats our native fir and spruces. Those are the primary food source for the spruce budworm. So our spruce fir forest that we all, you know, when I say in our backyard, I'm looking out my window right now and I'm looking at spruce and fir trees. And I am concerned about what's going to happen to them. So I got my eye on it. And at a bigger level, I got my eye on the bigger landscape. So it's a naturally occurring cycle. It runs on a cycle of about 30 to 40 years. The last outbreak lasted, you know, from roughly 1967 to 1993, really petered out in the late 80s. But it covered 136 million acres across eastern Canada and Maine at its peak. And I'm sure that many of you, you know, that are over 50 have some recollection of that in our state. As tree defoliation by the spruce budworm crosses Maine's northern border, you know, there's 5.8 million acres of spruce fir at risk in our area. So 5.8 million acres, it's a lot of ground. Those are forest stands that are predominantly spruce and fir dominated. They're at risk of defoliation. And defoliation, you know, why is that important to us? Well, you know, from a forestry perspective, it reduces growth, causes mortality on those trees over big areas. So that's very concerning as a major employer and forest products company, just ourselves. And historical data has been telling us, you know, over the last few years that there's been indications out there with the monitoring, and you'll get into it, that the populations are rising, and we've been paying attention to it. The most recent outbreak, if you're not aware of it, started in Quebec on the north shore of the St. Lawrence in 2006. And it started with about 7,500 acres being defoliated. To me, that was kind of an interesting number. I think that's a number I got off the Maine Forest Service website, 7,500 acres. To me, that's not a very big area. I'm used to thinking a lot bigger. So that's not a lot of acres, but that 7,500 acres, you know, in 2006, you know, has been allowed to spread virtually unchecked in Quebec. And today, I see stats, but the stats that I've seen lately, you know, as of 2020 was there's roughly over 33 million acres of forest in Quebec has suffered moderate to severe defoliation. So again, from what I understand, what I read, what I hear and whatnot, is it's moved from 7,500 to 33 million acres. So a lot of problems have gone on in Quebec over the last 10, 15 years. It's led to fires, dead trees, loss of jobs, etc. And I guess our concern is we just don't want or believe, I don't think we have to experience the same hardship as Quebec has faced. And we just don't want it to happen here. So, you know, with that being said, a new strategy has been worked on, you know, in New Brunswick and with partnerships with industry and experts at the state of Maine. And Neil's going to go over that in a little bit more detail for us. But basically, a new strategy called Early Intervention Strategy. It's been developed in New Brunswick. You know, they looked at it and said, what are we going to do when this stuff moves across the border into our operations? So they've been working under this strategy for the last, I don't know, 5-6 years, and it's been very effective at you know, reducing the risk of spread into the province. So we've been watching it, and you know, we've been communicating and aligning with the process. We've been watching the early intervention process, and we've been aligning ourselves over the last few years to try to line up with that process, because the alternative is to do nothing. And we don't feel that's acceptable. So Neil is specialized in outbreak history and the ecology of spruce budworms in his doctoral work, and through his leadership at CFRU, and he's responsible for the statewide monitoring program. So we're going to let Neil just kind of give us an update here on early intervention and whatnot. What do I need to do here, Cheryl? Just stop sharing and let Neil share?
Yeah, you can stop sharing and let Neil share. And I have two comments I'd like to make. If you don't have chat open, you can just click on that little bubble at the bottom of your screen that says chat, and you can see where people might be talking to each other or to everyone. If you have a comment for everyone, you can do that. Click on everyone. And I was just told by someone in chat that if I actually wrote down the participants, their online names, but if you want to say hello and chat to everyone, then that might be a good idea. You don't have to, certainly, but you can just click on chat and say hello. At least you'll know that it's working for you. So I think that's about it. Okay.
All right, well, thanks so much. We're all looking at a PowerPoint here with a life cycle diagram. Excellent.
Neil, yep.
Excellent, excellent. So good morning. I'm Dr. Neil Thompson from the forestry program at UMFK. I lived at Cross Lake very briefly when I first came back to Maine for my doctoral work in British Columbia, just across from the fire hall. Probably not long enough to make much of an impression. Then I moved back up into town. And I did a little bit of work on the tax maps for the phosphorus question before your grant came through. So I know some of you a little bit, and some of you know me a little bit. But for my own background, I grew up in the state of Maine. I went to British Columbia for my doctoral work studying the western spruce budworm, which is a close cousin of this one. And then I came back, and here I am. So I have a specialization in budworm from my doctoral work. I had the thought that I would go west where budworm was active and being actively managed, that I would learn all I could about it and come back here and be useful in some way. And that plan worked remarkably well. So I became involved in the monitoring of the overwintering population pretty well right away, and took full responsibility for the coordination of that program in 2019. That's organized under the Cooperative Forestry Research Unit, which is an applied research cooperative funded by landowners and the state of Maine. And interesting news about my job: as of October, I'm going to be leading that cooperative. So that's a little change in my job description, but I'm staying in the north. I own a house here. I'm staying here. That was the condition of my taking that. So I'm speaking to you here today because I know more than the average bear about spruce budworm. I'm responsible for the survey that identified the high population in your backyards. And I'm involved with the monitoring of the growth of the larvae that will inform exactly when the spray is going to happen within the bounds of the weather that makes it appropriate to do so. But to begin with the life cycle of the spruce budworm, we are currently right here. So it's just beginning to feed. It's feeding right now on the pollen cones of the balsam fir, which is a very concentrated food source for it, because it's putting all that energy into pollen and it's all in one place. And the pollen cones start to swell before anything else does, so it goes for that food source. So if you're looking for it right now, that's where you would find it. Over the coming weeks, you'll start to find it in the emerging buds and branch tips. And we call these L1 through L6. That's larval instar or larval life stage 1 through 6. And they're essentially bigger versions of each other. They molt between each one and they get bigger. So it starts feeding right about now. It matures, it pupates in June and July, reaches the adult moth and flying stage in July and August. And this is the only picture that's not mine here. This is the egg mass underneath the needle of a balsam fir. And those are laid in July and August, and they hatch right away. And they go as a, what's the L1 stage, and that doesn't actually eat. It goes and finds a nice spot to bed down for the winter, and that's where it stays. And it molts into the L2 stage, still without feeding. And then that is what wakes up in the spring. And that entire cycle is dependent on cold weather, which is why we have this in Maine, but maybe not Maryland. So the area of responsibility for me is this L2 monitoring survey, which I'll describe a little bit later, but we're using this population here to predict this population here. The Maine Forest Service manages a pheromone trap network, which looks at this life stage, which then informs the rest of this. So we have two lines of evidence trying to predict what the eventual population is going to be. So that's the general nature of the beast. The way to identify it, there's 4 white dots per body segment. And we'll look at some more pictures of that and its lookalikes pretty shortly here. To expand on the situation in Quebec, this is a map of L2 data. And that is, again, the overwintering larvae. So the larvae are waiting on branches for spring. We cut those branches, we bring them out, and then count the larvae that are on them. And the North Shore had it the worst to begin with, and it spread to the South Shore by 2012. So this is when the maps start. And these maps are on the healthyforestpartnerships.ca website, which I have linked at the end. And the colors are what they look like. Red is high, and the letter shades of yellow are low. And you can see there's some down here along the St. Lawrence by Quebec itself, but mostly on the North Shore. And then as we move forward, it expands and moves south in 2013, crosses the border for the first time in 2014. And this is when the New Brunswick early intervention strategy started. This strategy is essentially treating this as a big wildfire and these as spot fires that are put out. So they're using the L2 survey data to identify where, and then applying, as is planned here, an insecticide of biological origin that knocks that back below threshold where the natural factors are expected to keep it under control. And 2015 continued expansion here, so moving more along that border. And you watch it moves a little bit, and the idea of the EIS is to knock out those small spots, but there's continuous inflights from Quebec all the time. So every year, it's sending more budworm into New Brunswick and sometimes all the way down to us. So 2017, we keep moving forward. And notice these dots here. These are all dots, L2 data, where we have information. And those are going to go away because we just don't have data for that area in that time. So just have to be cautious not to overinterpret that. 2018, a lot of recession there. And then again in 2019, some growth and no data here in this part of Quebec. 2020, this is the larval population that's waking up right now. There's very decently sized concentration here just north of the border. This is the closest to us in terms of a New Brunswick spray block. So they're going to be treating here this year, right on the border here. And that is, again, done with the intention of not becoming a source population for the downwind areas. So they don't want these to become a source and provide more insects to the surrounding areas. Where, as Ked said, it's a native insect that normally exists at a background population level, which is perfectly acceptable. But it is the one caterpillar we have that eats spruce and fir that explodes into an outbreak like this and kills trees. So in terms of the state of Maine, and I know I have a lot of Maine Forest Service personnel on this call, so this is your map, and this is 2019, and this is the pheromone trap. The way that works is there's an attractive scent, essentially the scent of a female budworm, and that is attractive to the male. The male flies expecting to find a female and is then trapped and caught and counted. And that gives a total number of budworm moths flying around for the year. And that counts moths that are flying around from our own background population and moths that have flown in from Quebec or New Brunswick. And the question, of course, becomes, which is it? And since these are collected annually, we can't really say with that level of resolution. And that's where the flight models from the Canadian Forest Service come in. We know from long experience with the insect what weather conditions trigger it to take off and fly. And we know from weather radar which direction the wind is blowing, how strong, and where all that would take it if it was flying. So we know when they take off, we know which direction the wind will take them, and we know where they would likely be at those speeds when the sun comes up and they drop out of the air. So this is July 15th, 2019, and that put a spread of budworm pretty well across the northeast part of the state. And July 20th, 2019, 5 days later, another spread from the Quebec outbreak here, and red in the St. Lawrence means dead. So these are living budworm moths that will have dropped down and then laid their eggs. And that gave us the bulk of the population that we have right now. We know that from our own past surveys and data I'll show you shortly. 2019 was a big old hit in this game of Battleship, and 2020 was a near miss, where July 1st, we had very few take off and potentially land. July 3rd, again, a very few. Big flight on July 8th that landed in New Brunswick, but not in Maine by these calculations. And these projections have been found to be very accurate. They're a pretty good source of information as to where these things land. And again, are backed up by the pheromone trap data, which show a general decline in trap catch from last year to this year, which is a good thing. This is the average number of spruce budworm moths per trap by county in Maine. This is from the report from the Maine Forest Service. And this is for Aroostook County. We, of course, have the most, being closest. And 2019, we had an average of 139 moths per trap, down to 68 for the county, which is, again, very good. Similar trends statewide, largely driven by the Aroostook County numbers. And then when we get to the point of looking at the very long-term trends, so starting in 1992, at the very end of the last spruce budworm outbreak, we had some long-term monitoring traps by the Forest Service, Irving, Penobscot Nation, and the USDA Forest Service. So this shows the typical endemic population where it's present, but it's present in a way that does not cause significant damage. It's a perfectly fine part of the system. And this is where it started to peak up, came down, and 2019 is the highest that we've seen in a very long time. And thankfully that's come down a bit, but the exception, unfortunately, is right in Cross Lake Township. And that's where my survey comes in. And I say mine, but this involves all of the landowners in the northern part of the state and a lot of the central part of the state, and the cooperation of Maine Forest Service, which is greatly appreciated. So I coordinate and I collect the branches from them, but the foresters at all these companies and the Maine Forest Service personnel, Joe, if you're on here, thank you for collecting so many. And they collect branches from the mid part of the crown, which is where the spruce budworm likes to be. And those branches are brought in. We quantify the amount of defoliation on the branch tips, and then we send it off to a lab in New Brunswick, where they dissolve the little webs that the budworm larvae are hanging out in. They float to the surface, and then the larvae are counted. And that counting is at this stage. So the pheromone traps collect at this stage, which is a reasonable prediction of what's going to happen throughout this entire cycle. But the number of egg masses laid and the number of viable eggs per egg mass, and whether those egg masses are parasitized. This is a healthy hatched egg mass here, and this is a blackened parasitized egg mass here. We don't know how many of these are going to hatch and be viable. So that's where the L2 survey comes in. And the intention of that is to project into the next year. So we know right now what we can expect. And that is something that I coordinate under the sort of jurisdiction of the Cooperative Forestry Research Unit. And that involves a whole lot of interested parties. Our survey started in 2014 at the same time as New Brunswick kicked off, and we've really been piggybacking on their operation because we've relied on their lab that does the processing of the branches to count the L2s. And we've just got a grant funded to construct our own lab at the University of Maine to do this because we see the population's rising, and we can't rely on the kindness of our colleagues forever. So we've started a lab and we'll be processing here. But the purpose of it is, one, to know what's going on and provide a long-term baseline population level so we know what happens. It's very common for an insect outbreak to begin and then funding to come and then interest to come, but we don't really know how it started. We get in 3 or 4 years after the fact. So we wanted to be right on the ball when it was beginning. And the other purpose is to be an early alert system, where when you talk about 7,500 acres were defoliated, that is a number likely to have come from an aerial survey. And an aerial survey picks up defoliation when the backfeeding has occurred on the older needles and the branches change color, and that's visible from the air. The L2 survey can pick up orders of magnitude lower levels, so you can get a very good early detection of a population that is growing. And that's the goal here. So when we have a low endemic population, we don't mind it at all. But this what we call the eruption threshold. That's where it's reaching a level where it's showing a sign that it's going to start into this explosive population growth pattern and then become an outbreak. And that is what the intention is to avoid. That if we can catch it where it's very small, the ounce of prevention is worth the pound of cure. That's the entire philosophy of this system, that if we can catch it while it's small, if we can prevent it from becoming a problem, that prevents the rolling clear cuts of the last Spruce Budworm era, that prevents the massive spray programs of the last Spruce Budworm era. The idea is to catch it very, very small and get it as quickly as possible, so we have the minimum footprint, the minimum expense, and the minimum damage to the trees. So the New Brunswickers developed that early intervention strategy. It's very much dependent on that L2 survey. And their number is 7 L2 per branch, and that'll come up momentarily. So these are my maps. These are the outputs of the 2019 and 2020 Spruce Budworm surveys. Every one of these black points is a point with 0 L2. And these colors represent low levels. The red triangles here are moderately low levels. Again, not a huge concern. 3.6 to 4.0, that's getting to a level where it could be concerning. And in St. John Valley last year, we had some populations at that level. But the threshold of 7 was exceeded for the first time in this past year, and that was in your backyard at Cross Lake. So we can see there's some apparent increase. We've increased the density of sampling here because we know that's where a lot of budworm landed. And there's also some apparent increase here. But I got to be completely open with you here. The feedback from the lab we had in the last couple of years is that a lot of these branches were coming from too low in the crown to give a fully accurate representation. So we corrected some of that, got the folks reaching higher into the canopies of the trees. Did I actually send Ked Kaufman out with a chainsaw to cut trees down? Yes, I did. So Ked was actually out there with a saw cutting trees down so we could get exactly at the mid canopy so we would know exactly what we had going on. And that's not a criticism that was leveled at any particular company or any group, it was statewide. And that I made that point very, very clear. And I think, and I believe that a lot of this increase is just picking up better what we had before. That this is an increase here. I sent them out to collect data again because I didn't like the first data. And we finally got those numbers back, and they do show an increase from last year to this year from that secondary sampling. So this is an increase. A lot of this could just be a better sample than we had before. So this doesn't concern me too much. Continue monitoring, keep an eye on it, but it's not.
Can I interrupt just for a second, Neil?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks for all the extra effort you had me do with snowshoes and snowmobiling and chainsaws this winter.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So Neil asked us to really ramp up. I think we did an additional 60 surveys out there that we had to get done quickly once we started to see a problem. So you probably saw a lot of Irving pickups out there. But I was just going to bring up the interesting note here is, if you look back when the last outbreak, where it started, it was roughly in the same area. I call it the Cross Lake, Blackstone area, Westmoreland 15.5. And this summer, Neil and I and Mike Parizio were out, and Joe Byther probably saw it. I know Joe definitely would have seen it, but it was very evident. We were seeing budworm. I hadn't seen it in years. It was something that I'd just kind of forgotten about. I'd seen it out west, but I hadn't seen it back here like we were seeing it this summer, and it was in all those areas. So I'm not surprised based on what I felt I was seeing this summer, and not being an expert on it like you are, Neil. I'm not surprised that we had a hot spot pop up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So besides all of that, it's perfect host. There's a lot of spruce and fir around, a lot of fir in that area. And it is exactly where 2 wind flights of moths landed. So it's very predictable that it would happen here, given that input of information. Thankfully, the St. John Valley has declined, where there's a lot of small woodlots in there. There's a lot of, I was concerned about that growing, but that's declined as it should have done at the numbers that it was at. So the question of comes up next, what would New Brunswick do is what the first question that comes up is, because they have 5 years of experience doing it and it's been tremendously successful. So the first thing they do is do a follow-up survey, 1 to confirm what they found, and then 2 to enrich the data set, because you need to interpolate a value between the points. That means predict if I have 5 here and 8 here, in between those 2 points, there's got to be some value, and that averages a value for that position on the landscape in the context of all the points around it. So you need more points to do that and do that well. In our case, we did maybe 3 to 5 times more than New Brunswick would have done because of where it is, and because of it's the first one. We have access to it. We wanted to know the absolute most we could about it. So New Brunswick would treat down to an interpolated value of 3.5 branch, and 7 is the threshold to start. But then once you've got that, it's kind of spotty, and you'll see in the maps how it is that they go down to that 3.5 per branch level once the hotspot has been identified. And in New Brunswick, it's a publicly funded spray program. It started in 2014, had a budget of 17 million from 2014 to 2018, and up to 75 million from 2019 through 2023. So the governments, all parties, surprisingly, from the Greens to all the others, are very much in favor of this program, that they look at it as a $300 million solution to a $15 billion problem. That it's expensive. It costs a good chunk of change. And I'm not going to ask Ken exactly what here, but it is not a trivial expense. And in the public expense, it's that has to be considered very carefully. The economic analysis of that looked at the losses of revenue from the forest products industry, from tourism, from all of the things that rely on the forest for their persistence. So they consider this the ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure. And the pound of cure is what's called a foliar protection treatment. And that's what we were looking at in the 1980s and the 1970s and before, where the budworm outbreak had already expanded. There's already visible defoliation from the air. The populations were orders of magnitude higher than what we have right now. And all you can do at that point is try to keep the trees alive long enough for the outbreak to collapse on its own. That population management at that stage is impossible. It's a situation of keeping the trees alive, knocking the population back temporarily, so the trees get a little bit of a reprieve to get a new flush of needles, keep themselves alive, rebuild their sugar reserves, and carry on. And that was effective in and of what it was. But the estimated cost, if they had to do that, would be about $2 billion. And that is simply not going to happen. And that is probably not going to happen here either. That this is a prevention strategy rather than a treatment strategy. So in New Brunswick, they have an opt-out basis for private landowners. They have a lot of public land. They also have a lot of private land. And the default is to treat the private land as well, because it's all a potential source for moths to fly to the rest of it. But any private landowner is given the opportunity to opt out. And there's buffers on homes and camps that vary tremendously based on the situation and location, which is why this is a discussion here and not a this is what we're going to do. So in terms of Cross Lake, this is what the long-term monitoring plots look like. And this is that one dot. So we are looking at this area here, zoomed in here, and that's the spot. So these are the camp roads here. That's the access road, and that's the survey that I followed up with. And I've got this color coded by the 3.6 to 7.0, and then the greater than 7 all the way up to 28 L2 per branch, which is unfortunately the one closest to the lake, which is on the road as if you were going out to Square Lake, right about mile 1 there. That stand has got the highest population level. So this is an additional 46 points, and I think I sent these guys out with chainsaw and snowmobile on a nice day once, and then a very poor day after that, to get the best possible quality of data to answer this question and constrain this to the maximum amount possible. Unfortunately, we found another hotspot over towards Mud Lake, and that's a completely different conversation. But the big one is here on the northwest corner of Cross Lake. And that is the information that fed the maps that Ked will show you. What I did was I provided this data to the team at the New Brunswick Department of Natural Resources. They ran it through their models so that we are using the same data as an input as they would do in theirs. So that's the general area. Those are the points. And you can see sort of the spotty nature of this, where some of these return low values, not 0, but low. And some of these are above the thresholds. So we have a pretty decent idea of where this population is now. And that's what fed that, that map. In terms of the product that they are proposing to use here, Bacillus thuringiensis, that's the species, and Christaki is the variety of bacteria. So you can think about it the same way as think of an apple. Apple is Malus domestica, and the variety is Granny Smith. So Bacillus thuringiensis is a tremendously common bacteria in nature that you can find it in soil and a variety of other places. So the variety Christaki is the one that's toxic to true caterpillars. and only when they eat a certain amount of it. There's about 20 different varieties of BTK on the market. Another one you might be familiar with is Israelensis, and that's the one in mosquito dunks, if you've ever used that product. But it was first isolated, the Bacillus thuringiensis, at the turn of the last century, around 1901. It was used in agriculture after World War II and developed for forestry use in the 1970s. It was brought into the budworm spray programs at full scale in the 1980s and was the primary product that we used in the last year of treatment in the state of Maine. It was developed specifically to replace the broad spectrum chemical insecticides that we were using at the time. And in addition to budworm, it's found extensive use in gypsum moth control programs, including over cities and suburbs. And the mechanism itself, the way it works is it's a bacterial spore and the protein that it makes. And the spore is kind of like a seed or an egg in that it needs a very specific set of conditions to germinate and grow. And the conditions for this one are the alkaline or basic or high pH of a caterpillar's stomach. And our stomachs, of course, are acidic. If you burp, you have acid reflux, and that's one of the differences in our physiology. But when the BTK, Bacillus thuringiensis, finds itself in those conditions, the spores germinate and produce the toxin that then breaks down. So the way that it works is the spore, the bacterial spore, germinates. In the course of its life, it produces these crystalline proteins. And those proteins break down into very specific actual toxins that bind to a specific spot on the cell wall of caterpillar's stomach. And then that breaks the stomach apart and causes death. So the receptors are very specific. It's sort of like a lock and a key, to the extent that if you've ever seen a sawfly, it looks very similar, but being sawfly, it's not actually a caterpillar. And they don't have those receptors, even though they look quite similar. And if you use BTK on a sawfly, it won't do anything to it. And likewise for bees and other non-target organisms, that if it's a caterpillar that eats the foliage that has been treated, it is very likely to die. If it is simply in contact with it, it is not, it has to be ingested. And other studies on bees, other pollinators, it is not harmful to them. So what that adds up to is a very narrow spectrum or specific mode of action. And it's used quite a lot in agriculture. And it's acceptable up to the day of harvest on products, including products that are available for use on organic farms. So what's actually coming out of the nozzle is the mix of bacterial spores, which would germinate, and the proteins they manufacture, which also become activated in the high pH of the caterpillar's stomach. And what else is coming out of the nozzle is a mix of the food source that it was reared on, because it's almost like brewed like you would brew a beer, where it's in a fermentation tank and it's got a variety of food sources, potato starch, among other things, that it eats. And that is part of the thing that comes out the nozzle. So 4A76B, which is the product at hand here, was developed specifically for forestry applications to be used from the air. And it's a much more concentrated product, meaning you can fly more area without having to land and refill the tank and consume more fuel. And it's otherwise the same product, but it's more expensive and hasn't gone through the USDA organic certification process because it's not made to be used on crops. So the bacteria die and proteins degrade fairly quickly. It's effective for about 3 to 7 days, with a shorter side being if it's sunny because it breaks down under UV radiation. This product has been used in New Brunswick for the past 5 years against budworm, their early intervention strategy, and has a long history of testing and use, and the Maine Bureau of Pesticide Control has registered for it for use in the way planned here. Lastly, I want to show you the beast itself. This is as you would expect to find it right now. This is these are the pollen cones, which are just starting to swell and open. That is their preferred food source, very concentrated source of nutrition for them. You would likely find them currently inside and then burrowing out. So as that pollen cone is swelling, they mine their way into it, they grow quickly, and then burst out and emerge. So if you find chewed up pollen cones, that's likely them. And then the identification, once it gets into the later instars, goes from this sort of pale translucent color when it's very tiny, into this dull green-brown. There's 4 white dots per body segment always, and never has these longitudinal lines along the back. This is spruce coneworm, which you would find in the same place, doing the same thing in the same way. The coneworm sort of likes the same weather conditions as spruce budworm. It also exists at low levels practically all the time, but you don't really find it until you're looking for spruce budworm because it never really gets going into great numbers. And BTK would also hit this one BTK would also hit this oblique banded leaf roller. This is a very close cousin. It is the same genus, the Spruce Budworm, and it's a tremendous pest of apple orchards. I have them on my own apple trees that I just squish when I find them. But in commercial production, this is BTK is often used in apple orchards to control exactly this. This also exists in the North Maine woods, also eats fir in the same way at the same time. And that's another one you might find. It's bright green. You really can't mistake it. It doesn't have the 4 white dots. It has 4 dots, but they're very faint and they're black. So it is not striped. It is not bright green. It is not sociable. This is sawfly, and they all will share a branch tip. The budworms sort of web branches together, and they defend their spot against other budworms. They're very antisocial. So this one doesn't have the receptors that the BTK toxin would bind to, so it wouldn't be harmed. And the fir cone worm will live inside of the cones of the balsam fir and also within the shoots. And because it's not feeding in an exposed condition, would also be fine. So there's a tremendous amount of information on the healthyforestpartnership.ca website. That's a very well developed site. And also sprucebudwormmaine.org is our website that we're really bringing up to snuff now that we have this situation going on. And that's managed by the CFRU. So both of these can be good sources of information. But as Ked said, I'm also happy to meet with people in the field if they want to take a walk on the road at an appropriate distance and have a conversation about the biology of the insects. So I'm going to stop sharing there and let y'all carry on.
So Ked, I don't know where you wanted to go from here. Thank you, Ned. That was very interesting. Or Neil, I'm sorry, that was very interesting.
Thank you. And I should also mention before we move on, the timing of the spray is going to be determined by the development of the larvae. And that's something that I'm going down on a weekly basis to collect branches from the site that has the most. And I'm using that to track what stage of development they're at. And in conversation with the Maine Forest Service, they're going to be helping out on that same monitoring. And that's why you had a range of dates and not a specific date, because we can't say it's going to develop on the 1st of June from.
We don't know. That's good. Great point. Great point.
So that's one other level of involvement that I have. Now back to you, Ked.
All right. Well, listen, Neil, we can't say enough about your help in this project. You know, it comes down to folks like Chris and I being the boots on the ground, the folks that pull the operation together. But we're not experts in all of these little nuances, you know, with any of these projects. We rely on folks like yourself, you know, scientists like yourself, the good people at the Maine Forest Service, the Board of Pesticide Control, and the Department of Environmental Protection to, you know, help guide us in the right directions so that we undertake things responsibly in the right manner. We couldn't do it without you. I can relate to your discussion about hotspots, you know, equating it to like fires. That's exactly the way that I look at it, is a fire starting, and how do you make sure that you protect it, keep it from growing. And a big part of that is looking at the fuel source that's out in front of it. You know, so not only dealing with the fire, but dealing with the fuel source to keep it from spreading. So thank you, Neil. And folks, if you get a chance to go out with Neil, he's a tremendous resource. I've learned so much about a lot of things being out anytime I've spent in the woods with Neil. So, you know, the treatment area and application, and Chris, you jump in here where you feel appropriate. You know, this is where this whole thing started. You know, part of the rules that we have to comply with Maine Board of Pesticide Control and whatnot, it's really quite complex, but one of the very most important rules is what we call a SALO, or what the state of Maine defines as a SALO, which is and I have to remind myself of what that means sometimes. And basically, I look at it as it's a place somebody's living, dwelling. In other words, you know, if you take that acronym and break it down, it's a sensitive area likely occupied. So nowhere in this treatment area that we've defined, you know, in the broader context, if you look at the small map, I don't know if you can see my my pointer here.
Yeah, we can see it,
My
Ken.
mouse right there. So yeah, at a broad scale, these are the two areas that break down from Neil's previous slide. The Canadian Forest Service putting together those points based on what food conditions are there. They've defined those areas on the landscape at the large level. And that breaks down to the only place where we're in close proximity or within 1,000 feet of the condition, known as a SALO, is on the West Side Road. All of the other operations are well away from any potential dwellings, or we've automatically, they've automatically just been buffered out because of the food source and whatnot. So anyways, so that's the big thing here, is letting folks know. We've sent out, that's why all the letters and whatnot, and the broad range of dates that Neil refers to. It's because of the physiology of the trees, the insects, how they all come into play this year. It's an early spring. So we're just kind of waiting to see what'll happen, but we have to let people know within a certain range, and we've done that. And then we've just said, let's try to expand on it, because more knowledge is better. So if you look at the screen here, Neil talked about the road into Square Lake. So you come in the West Side Road and you head out towards Square Lake, where there's usually a grader or a plow truck or something parked there. This is that hot spot right here that had 28 larvae per branch. Okay, it's right there in that red spot. So there's a fire right there, and you've got your camps. I think I was talking to, I think it was Greg Sear. I think Greg has a camp right in here somewhere, off the, what is that, Shoreline Drive, Cheryl? Yeah, that's Shoreline Drive. So, there's a camp there, Greg's camp here, and then it kind of peters out down here. I'm guessing that's down somewhere around Jay, Natasha Plord, maybe Rick St. Peter. I think Rick's down there. Somewhere in that area, it kind of stops based on the data that we're looking at. So the SALO area, basically is, Chris, you correct me if I'm wrong, you're the one that put this all together, is this yellow outline. That's where the camps are. We expanded it beyond the camps. Our yellow, actually, if you can look at this in a little bit more detail, we actually put it across the road, beyond the septics, beyond, some people have got some garages and whatnot on the opposite side of the road of the camps. So Chris, if I remember right, we've got basically a 300-foot strip here that we've identified as the SALO.
That's correct. Yep.
And we've buffered off 1,000 feet from the edge of what we defined as the SALO. So I guess what I'm saying is we've given it a little extra cushion here, and that's what the discussion is buffering. We want to be comfortable that we can pull an operation off that is going to protect the forest, protect for ourselves, but also I personally have concerns about fire. I said it in an email at one time. Every time I drive down by Jewel's store, up through there, I think about all the camps there, and I see the budworm food source. And it does make me nervous, potential fire conditions. So I'm concerned about getting too close to the camps, but I'm also concerned about not getting close enough. So how close is too close? That was a big reason, that we wanted to talk with folks. And our feeling is, we're very confident that we can work within the 1,000-foot zone, following all the rules for wind and drift and all of that kind of stuff, and timing and all the weather events. And the technology, the capability of our people, we're very confident that we can pull this off. But at the same time, we're saying right now that we'd increase that buffer to this brown here, we've thought really, we'd probably, people would feel better if we left a little bit more of a strip from the salo. So we're proposing to, I think, Chris, you know, the minimum distance is 250 feet from that yellow line, which is roughly 50 to 100 feet on the other side of the road that we wouldn't treat.
Correct.
Is
Yeah,
that
we tried to encompass anything that could be leased land in that salo, and then we
Mhm.
did a 250-foot buffer off of that salo.
So there's very, you know, Maine Board of Pesticide Control has very strict guidelines that we have to follow for wind and drift and the timing and the application. You know, we've tried to look at everything and think, well, are there any school buses going in there and whatnot that we need to be concerned about? You've heard me ask questions about that and whatnot. So we've tried to ask all the questions, and basically it comes down to, we feel very comfortable that we can pull this operation off. We need to pull this operation off. We have the right people to do it. We have the skills to do it. And we have the drive to, you know, be respectful and try to make this work in a manner that that should protect folks and make them feel comfortable. That's what we want to do. So the treatment area would be, I guess it's that kind of a yellow, and then obviously it expands out into this. The shading is kind of as a green here. That's kind of the general spray area. You're outside of the camps. You're well out within them. Our goal would be to time that and to get that knocked out as quick as possible. But, you know, maybe if the weather conditions are right, but it's the weekend, we don't do it. So we're open to letting people know and using our common sense to work around the camps. So I guess
This is Ron.
Yeah, Ron.
I just want to make another note that when we do the application, we'll be flying parallel to the salos.
Yes.
We won't be flying from east to west. So that the helicopter will not be flying over the salo, and it won't be flying over the buffer area, but flying parallel to it and not flying over the water at all. So when it makes the treatment.
Yeah, the concern I have with not working within, I call it the brown area, with not treating that is that makes that more of a susceptible spot to a flare up with budworm. So it's a concern. So we're trying to weigh the budworm and the social concerns of being in proximity to folks. Next slide. So, you know, when you're out, you're basically you're gonna see folks like myself and Chris out there. We will block roads. You'll see signs similar to the one on the left, you know, and we're just gonna say, you know, stop. These are no pass. There might be somebody there. There may not be somebody there. In some cases, we want to block admittance to areas. So we will see signs up, and we just ask that you respect them, and we will remove them when operation has moved. At the same time, we're no different than anybody else. We're impatient, and we want to move along and go to our spot or do whatever we're planning on doing. And we understand that people have a need to or desire to move along. And we will, you know, look to get that taken care of as quickly as possible so we don't mess up anybody's plans. The other one you'll see is another sign I call it a caution treatment area, for lack of a better word. You know, it's just it's a notification. So when folks, you know, it might not be, you know, we might be out in the general area and we're just out there going at it and we're just doing it, and we're not keeping you up to date on that. We're more concerned about keeping you up to date on the, you know, what's going on in West Shore Road and whatnot. So you will see signs wherever we're working that, you know, basically please stay out of that area. We're asking, you know, for a 48-hour reentry, you know, before. So we'll take the signs down when it's appropriate to go back into those areas. And the reentry time on those areas is 48 hours. So we just ask you to stay out. Yeah, so in general, you know, the start of the general operations is totally dependent on when the bugs start feeding. Neil and I'm hoping Joe and some of the folks at the Maine Forest Service have got some time to help out and keep track for us. So we're starting and stopping as needed. One of the things is, you know, operations are only performed when the weather conditions are right. And usually we will be starting, I'm not old enough to have been involved in these operations but what I know about weather conditions and whatnot, and from folks that have been involved in these programs, is usually you're looking at starting at sunrise or just before sunset. It's very early morning. It's late in the evening kind of conditions that you're able to do the treatments and stay within compliance of the law and the label. So, and rightfully so. So like I said before, the salo or the camp area will receive priority. You know, we want to get that knocked out as quickly as possible. And we will, I think, Cheryl, we've already distributed some of the information sites for folks to look at. Neil's talked about a few here, and we'll if we got anything new, we'll pass it on to FOCL to push out to folks. And I'll go back up to here. Oh, sorry. So, did you lose my screen, Cheryl? Or I lost my screen?
Yes, we did. You stopped.
Yes,
sharing.
you stopped sharing. Okay, now you started again.
Okay, bear with me. I'm like a monkey with a gun here. Okay.
You can keep it in that format if you'd like.
Okay. So for sake of time here, you know, I guess, you know, Neil's talked about field tours and whatnot, you know, so it's about communication, you know, is communication, not so much at the signage stage in my mind, but how do folks know when we plan to start and whatnot? If they've got particular concerns about spruce budworm, et cetera, where do they reach out for it? And we will provide you, Cheryl, I think probably the best way to do that is to try to run through stuff through yourself, through FOCL. Just ask you to be able to push information out to folks as needed. As things commence, as Joe Byther or Neil Thompson say, hey, the bugs are ready and conditions are ready and we've got our stuff together, we'll let you know when we're going to be, where we're going to be and what's up, just to keep people informed. So, Chris, thoughts?
I think that's good. We did have 2 questions come in through chat here that we can speak to. So first one being, is there any potential negative impacts for the BTK? And I think to that, with anything, there's risk assessments that are done. So when we consider those risk assessments, BTK is very specific, like Neil spoke to, and what it targets. So it has potential to affect other Lepidoptera species at that same time frame. And also, you know, further up the food chain if we're taking some of that food out. But we feel that, you know, at this stage, that risk analysis points us to treatment because those risks are not as great as what could potentially develop here to impact the state. So with anything, there's risk, but we feel with BTK, that product choice is very safe and has minimal side effects. I think Neil did a great job, Dr. Thompson did a great job speaking to how specific the mode of action is. So, you know, when you're talking pest treatment, it doesn't really get much more specific than this product. And then the other question was, how high does the helicopter fly above the canopy? So we're targeting 150-foot swath width. So when the helicopter flies, it'll be targeting 150-foot swath. To get that with the nozzle applications, they'll be about 40 feet above the canopy. So that there'll be, somewhere around that 90 to 100-foot height, just to let that swath develop.
Chris, you also had some questions earlier that Kat answered that I don't know if everyone here heard, but for example, like your vegetable garden or picking raspberries and later strawberries out in the woods. And obviously it has no potential harmful effect to humans. Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah. Should we, I'll pull up what Ked wrote so that I don't get too
Ked's
far
got to
off track.
stop. Ked's got to stop sharing if you're going to share, Chris.
Chris, you're probably better off winging it because you never know with me.
Okay, well, so I mean, I'll try to make sure we follow the same line of thought that Ked sent out to folks. But as far as vegetable gardens, so we feel that, by encompassing all the leased area in our silo, and then additionally buffering that 250 feet, we will not have any impact to your vegetable gardens or such things. That being said, BTK is labeled for it, but obviously it's not our intent to hit it, and we won't be hitting your vegetable garden. So,
well, BTK can be labeled for it. In this case,
correct.
It's probably for marketing reasons.
Yeah, the product we're using is not labeled for vegetable garden, so we will not be doing it. Oh, and I see Greg had a question here. Well, West Side Road.
What about Chris? Chris, what about, I think Cheryl was asking about berries. When people picking berries and whatnot. Concerns.
So I think as far as berry picking, so if you're seeing the signs that we are in the area, please respect the signs, and that would include berry picking. So don't pick any berries in areas that are signed until we're past that re-entry date. So it's a 48-hour re-entry. So if we're past that re-entry date, then folks can go back in, but please respect those signs and don't go in for berry picking or other activities during that time frame if they could.
The other question about the West Side Road being blocked, I think we're going to be sitting on that. I'm going to be sitting on that road, Ked, when we do that application, and I'll be driving up and down the road. So if anybody has questions, I'll be at the mouth of that road.
That's exactly right. Hopefully, Greg, I think that was Greg's question. Hopefully this is hopefully when we do this, you're still sleeping and there's no interruption and you're not even on the road. But if things time out where we actually are, then we will block the road, but it should only be for a very short time.
It's only during the roads will only be blocked during the application of the helicopter. So
right,
not after the apapplication's been
well,
done.
yeah, only when we're applying.
The
Once we
roads
get
don't have
away and we're
foliage,
outside.
so there's no foliage on the road, so that's not our target. So the road areas will be reopened as soon as we're not actively spraying on the roads.
And we're talking about to do that.
There was a question
block-
from somebody about
Oh, froze up.
I just got cut off or
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
froze, Ken.
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We didn't do it.
Okay. Yeah, I bet. Your brother probably did. Randy Legassi had a question about do we record the helicopter flight lines, I think. The answer is yes. So just so folks are aware, and this goes for all of our operations, whether we're doing this or herbicide, everything is state-of-the-art GPS AgNav systems, calibrated flows out of the machines, specific nozzles and whatnot for doing the type of application that we're doing. And part of that process is when they start to apply, they actually record the actual flight lines. We know exactly where the product has been applied. It's all digitally recorded. We've got files. We keep all the files because we've had places where we've had people say, I was out fishing on such and such a lake and you guys sprayed me. And we go back and say, well, I've had a few cases where I said, I know we didn't because we weren't even close to you. But just to verify it, you know, never say never, you can pull up the track files and it shows you exactly when the product starts to come out of the helicopter to when it shuts off and exactly where he was on the face of the earth. So we're able to really track our records very, very closely. We know if somebody got, you know, too close to something or did something they shouldn't have done. And our pilots are, our contractor is a fabulous state-of-the-art professional operator in every aspect of his business, and has very high standards, and they are very well certified. They're master certified spray professionals. So we feel very comfortable with all of that. So long answer to a short question, Randy.
I see Steve has a question about what other Lepidoptera species could be impacted, and are any of them species of concern?
I'll take that one.
I'll be the first to admit I'm not an expert on the Lepidoptera, but we have petitioned our company naturalist who has worked through with IF&W and Maine natural areas, I believe, to ensure that we are not inside any species of concern areas. So we have confirmed that. But as far as to what particular species, I'm not properly equipped to comment that. I don't know if Dr. Thompson has the ability or.
Yes, so I'm looking at the list of threatened and endangered species and the range maps right now, and none of the ones that have range maps appear to be anywhere within 10 townships of this area. The one that is often of concern in agricultural settings is the monarch caterpillar, which is our only migratory butterfly species, personal interest of mine. But around here, the caterpillars are around a month after this application is proposed, and I've never seen any milkweed in that area, so it's not something I'm concerned about personally.
There's another question. How do we obtain dates for the tours?
Yeah, it's on here too.
Neil, your
Well,
thoughts on that?
Send me an email and
I think so.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
But it would be,
Folks,
I can do one-on-ones, but it would be nice if we get a few people together if there's an interest and we can walk the road together and talk about whatever you want to talk about. But yeah, pretty much my schedule is field work throughout the summer, and I can carve time out of that for you whenever that happens to work for you.
and keep me in the loop as well. Go ahead, Cheryl.
I was gonna say I will be sending out an email, and also I can put on Facebook the link to the recording of this meeting, and I'd be happy to have people email. Do you want them to email you, Neil, directly and copy Ket on that? Is that I can put your email out?
You just go ahead and put my email out, and they can shoot me an email, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Just don't put it anywhere I'm going to get on any more spam websites.
Yeah, I won't put it on Facebook, but I'll tell people they can message us, and then they can get your email.
Other questions? Well, listen, it's a beautiful day. I'm good, but I'm available. Chris is available. I know there's a lot. This is big yard sale day in Caribou and those places. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't expecting to see a lot of participation because I know I've talked to some folks, and you get the run of the mill and maybe run of the mill responses. I think maybe we'll see some folks involved with the tours, and I think that's probably more appropriate. I know if I was at Cross Lake, I'd probably on a day like today, I'd skip this meeting and I'd want to go out on a tour with Neil, and hopefully we'll have more of that. But we really appreciate Cheryl, honestly, Cheryl and Kirk and FOCL. We can't say enough thanks for helping us, Chris and myself, work through this. I've learned a lot. Cheryl's critiqued my spelling and my penmanship and my everything, and I've learned a lot. I thought I was a professional, but Cheryl's tuned me up. So I guess we'll leave it at that unless anybody's got any other questions. I see one thing in the chat, but keep it, people should feel comfortable reaching out to us, because we don't want anybody to have any fears or concerns that we're just out there running willy-nilly. It's not what this is about. We want folks to know that they should feel comfortable that we're thinking things through and we're paying attention.
Ken,
neighbors.
Go ahead, Ron.
Can you send me Cheryl's contact information? And what I can do is, once we get close to making the application, I can give her a one-day
Yeah.
heads up, so she can send an email to people to let them know most likely when it's going to be.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Okay.
Is that okay, Cheryl? Would that be possible?
Oh, that's, yes, I already volunteered to do that. Yeah. So that's
Okay.
fine.
All right. Well, folks, you have a great weekend. Okay. Thank you very much. And we'll just stay in touch.
Yeah, I wanted to thank all of you, Neil and Chris and Ked, for being willing to do this presentation to let people know what's going on. And again, it's recorded, so I'll post it if people, I did have a few people ask me that couldn't make it. And hopefully if people want tours, they'll contact Neil. And I appreciate you guys letting everybody know everything that you did. So it was very, very informative. Thank you very much.
All
Thank
right.
you, Cheryl.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
for having us.
Cheryl. Keep your husband in check.
She does.
See you later.
Hey, if
I
you guys
know.
can come up with
Thank
some
you,
kind of
everyone.
pesticide for algae, we'd appreciate that too, so.
I'm not going to touch that one. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good weekend, folks.